Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vecenie. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Markelle Pina here. We're going to talk about the Eastern Conference and how it's basically a mess right now. Would you agree with that?
Hello, Sam. I would agree with that. Yeah, it's not looking great.
I would just like to send a quick shout out here while I have the time at the top to the 2-year-old girl who coughed on my hand during the plane flight down here. I'm looking really forward to the baby flu that I'm about to get in 2 days.
It's all over for you.
Yeah, my life is just about to be miserable down here in San Antonio, which is just a fantastic town. We're right next to the Alamo Dome here in the Riverwalk. I'm excited to go out tonight. But before we do that, let's talk to Mike about the East. So what is your kind of biggest storyline right now in the East?
Well, I mean, I think there's LeBron and, coming off we're recording this on a Wednesday, and last night they were thumped by the Miami Heat. And, they've just been kind of a interesting team that struggled for most of the season. One of LeBron as a team, and from a team perspective, one of his team's worst seasons that he's had in well over a decade. So it'll be interesting to see, how their defense performs in the playoffs. Are the Raptors for real is obviously a really much talked about storyline. And then injuries galore. From the Celtics and Kyrie Irving, and so it's there's a ton of different interesting storylines, and I don't know how silly will all look if it's just Cavs, Raptors, Eastern Conference Finals or something like that, if that's how it can even shake out. So it's a Philly, we'll see how good Philly is. They might just disrupt everything. So it's a lot of interesting narratives to take place over the next few weeks for sure.
So yeah, with Cleveland, I guess we should start there. The problem that I'm having with Cleveland is that because guys keep shuttling in and out of the lineup, like Rodney Hood has missed a couple games. Kevin Love is going to miss the game that happens Wednesday against the Hornets with a concussion. And, Larry Nance has missed a game here and there. And Tristan Thompson has been in and out of the lineup. I don't really know what to make of where the organization is right now and where even their playoff rotations are right now. So it's even just hard for me to get a handle on how they look come playoff time if everyone is healthy, and I'm hoping that everyone will be healthy.
Yeah, that's 100% accurate. I mean, coming off the trade deadline where they, basically turned over their majority of their rotation, they haven't really had the health that they've needed over the last few weeks to gain any sort of continuity. They might fall out of the 3rd seed and the 4th seed, which is a whole different conversation. But I mean, LeBron James has been just an absolute monster, throughout all this ridiculousness. And, with Kevin Love out, Larry Nance out, all the guys that you mentioned, he's kind of held it all together in some of the most impressive individual basketball anybody's played this season outside of Houston. So I don't know how sustainable he is playing at that level. But I mean, I think the last time I talked to you, we kind of broached this, just like doubting LeBron James is not really a wise thing to do at this point. So, but it is really just, the defense that they make so many mistakes in terms of their communication, in terms of their coverages. Having a head coach who's been out as long as Ty Lue has, and it's unknown when he'll be back, that's another quagmire for this team. So I don't know how good they are or how consistent LeBron can be playing at that absolute ridiculous. We know he'll be good, but we don't know how great he can be over a sustained stretch.
So what do we think their best lineup is? It's probably George Hill, LeBron, maybe Larry Nance, Rodney Hood, and Kevin Love, maybe? No, but that puts LeBron at like the 3, and I don't know if you want to do that. Like,
yeah, I like LeBron at the 4. I wrote a piece earlier about, they've played with Love, Nance, and Thompson out. They've had to kind of play Jeff Green and LeBron in the front court. And, that offense, when you surround him with that level of 3-point shooting, is obviously unstoppable. But, you go to the other end, and when LeBron is your primary rim protector, you get thrashed a little bit. But so, I personally it's tough because I like LeBron at the 4. That leaves either Kevin Love or Nance off the floor. And, this team has been so great in the limited minutes that Nance has played. So I would like him to be, in the game and active, and he's a really important part of their defense. But taking Kevin Love out of the situation is, that's tough because he's easily their second best offensive player. So I'm not sure. And you didn't even name J.R. Smith in that 5-sub. And, he's kind of been a linchpin on the wing for them over the past few seasons. So it's tough. I think I would probably at this point play JR over Rodney Hood if I had to close. But I don't know. I don't know, man. And then there's Kyle Korver also. Yeah. Who really complements LeBron on the offensive end. He's going through his issues off the court and has struggled defensively, given that he's like 35 or 36 years old. So I don't really know what the answer is, and it's really difficult to kind of figure out what the best lineup is for this team at the end of games.
Yeah, with Larry Nance on the floor, just for what it's worth, the Cavs are 6.5 points better defensively. They have like an actually respectable 106.3 defensive rating in the 370 minutes he's played in Cleveland. Their offense has been slightly better as well, but I would imagine that they have better options. Playing Kevin Love at the 5 is certainly a better option for them offensively. As you mentioned, any lineup where the Cavs have had LeBron James surrounded by shooters like Kevin Love and Kyle Korver and George Hill and one of JR or Rodney Hood, those lineups are just murdering offensively right now. And they're going to have to make a real sizable decision here and decide on do they just want to make teams outscore them, or do they want to keep Larry Nance on the court, possibly at the expense of Kevin Love, and try and defend teams? Because I think you can make a case for it. I don't know that I would do it, though.
No, and we haven't really even talked about Tristan Thompson, who has been so important for this team defensively, creating second opportunities on the offensive glass. When he's healthy, he's a real difference maker. And we saw that 2 finals ago. And then in last year's finals, he was terrible. And, they lost in 5 games. That was not a coincidence. Yeah. So it's really tricky to bench such an important player. And then that speaks to, how disruptive will he be? How unhappy, I should say, will he be if he's not playing at the end of games, or if he's averaging, 15 minutes a game or something like that. So it's all these different puzzle pieces that don't necessarily fit. You can't have Tristan and Larry Nance basically ever on the court at the same time, so long as LeBron is out there. And I would imagine LeBron is going to play, 45, 46 minutes. Yeah. So
I would argue almost you can't have them both in the rotation even. You have to pick one.
Yeah, and if you have to pick one, I'm going Larry Nance probably. And so that's just because Thompson's probably he's one of their 3 best defenders for sure when he's healthy. And this is the second worst defense in the league this season. So that's not a recipe for success right there.
No, yeah, they're in trouble right now in terms of just kind of getting guys playing together on the floor. So where do you kind of put this team in the lay of the land now? Because are they more like kind of the ultimate wild card? Because like LeBron James can literally win series against any of the Eastern Conference teams by himself. Or are they the favorite because LeBron James can win a series against any Eastern Conference team by himself?
The whole season, I've kind of thought that Cleveland should be considered favorites just because defeating LeBron 4 times in 7 tries is almost impossible unless you have the best team of all time assembled.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man. Like, the Toronto Raptors look real good. They have the best offense in basketball since the All-Star break. They've had a top 10 defense all year. Their net rating has been basically top 3 all season. So they're real good. They're real deep. I think they have bodies that you can throw at LeBron. Pascal Siakam, Serge Ibaka, Norm Powell. I think you can really make LeBron's life difficult. OG Anunoby, didn't even mention him, who's, he's kind of fallen, not out of the rotation, but his minutes have been limited lately. He can be important. So I just think that this could be their year. And so I kind of am looking at them as the favorite. I'd be silly if you're just looking at numbers not to do that. That being said, it's just like LeBron is, I think you said like an X factor. It wouldn't surprise me. I don't think it would surprise anybody who's ever watched a basketball game if the Cavaliers went to the finals this year. LeBron is just that great. So I'm waffling back and forth. And, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm just going to blindly go down with LeBron as LeBron. And I'm just going to pick the Cavs, even though everything is all these signs are telling me that that's not a smart thing to do.
So let's talk about Toronto, kind of in that vein, because right now, among lineups that have played at least 200 minutes, there are 42 of them throughout the entire NBA this year. The Raptors bench unit of Fred VanVleet, DeLon Wright, CJ Miles, Pascal Siakam, and Jakob Poeltl have the second best net rating in the entire NBA at 22.2. They've been just really, really good throughout the course of the entire year. Does the fact that the Raptors get so much value out of their bench unit scare you going forward into the playoffs whenever lineups and rotations kind of shrink and you end up getting into a situation where, LeBron James is playing 40 minutes and getting a significant amount of time against those units as opposed to those units getting more time against other bench units?
I don't think it does, to be honest. I think that this lineup might be kind of an outlier in that, I mean, they're just better than the way that they play together, the way that they complement one another. They have tremendous 3-point shooting. Their front court is just so active. I mean, Siakam and Jakob Poeltl, their chemistry passing the ball, attacking the offensive glass, swarming, pick and rolls. They're just really good. And so I don't know if there are that many starting units that scare me in terms of being able to go on a massive run against this lineup. So, I mean, and when you look at it like a guy like Fred VanVleet, who basically closes games with them next to Lowry and DeRozan, he's held his own against the other team's best 5-man unit in crunch times throughout the entire season. So I don't really have a problem with it. I think throughout a 7-game series, they might be able to even wear opponents down. It all depends on the matchups, obviously, but I think the last factor is just when you look at the minutes that DeRozan's played 34, I think, a game, so that's pretty up there. But if you look at the minutes of Kyle Lowry particularly, I expect him to, not totally shit the bed in the playoffs as he has in years past. I think he's rested. I think the way he's played over the past few weeks has been tremendous. I think, he's been one of the more underrated, overlooked players in basketball right now because of the attention that this bench unit is getting. And so I expect him to, bring it in a way that he has not in years past. So when you just combine all those factors, the Raptors they're a hellacious beast. Yeah,
with Lowry, it's so interesting because I think you could say that about his entire career over the course of the last 3 or 4 years, really, since he's gone on this all-star run. He has continued to be one of the most underrated players in the NBA. The last 2 years, 2015-16 and 2016-17, I don't really think you can make a case that he wasn't a top 5 point guard when he was on the floor, at least. And he didn't really get treated as such, in large part due to his playoff performances. The big question is whether or not he's just going to be able to consistently knock down shots in the playoffs. The numbers just haven't been there for him as a shooter. I mean, this is a guy that over the course of his last, 3 years now, he's been like a 40% three-point shooter. And over his playoff career, even as a star in Toronto, he's been at like 30% from three. That's just not good enough. He needs to continue to knock down shots in a significant manner. And I really hope that his lesser minute load throughout the course of the year helps him. And I really hope that last year, for instance, it was the injury that kind of held him back, because Kyle Lowry is one of my favorite players in the entire NBA. I just love watching that dude play.
Yeah, and I think, 3-point percentages are 3-point percentages, and in small sample sizes, anything can happen. But just the way he impacts games beyond that, you see him cut through the lane, catch a pass, make a pass on the move to an open corner 3-point shooter. His effort level is just always at 10. So that's kind of what I look for. I mean, I think he leads the league in charges taken. That might not be accurate, but every time I watch the Raptors play, he takes a charge against a guy who's twice his size.
It sounds right, Pina.
Yeah, that's all that matters. So, all the little things he does, he's been a beast on the boards this season on the defensive glass. So I'm a huge fan. I'm with you. And when they go small and they have all these different ball handlers on the floor to kind of take the pressure off him, he doesn't have to run. I think like 30, it was in the low 30% of his possessions that were ended as a pick and roll ball handler last year. And I think it's down to like the mid to low 20s this year. So it's a huge drop off. He's just attacking in all these different ways, and he is phenomenal. And I expect him to play much better in this postseason than he has in years past.
I've checked up on your charges drawn stat. He does not lead the league in charges drawn per game. That's Ersan Ilyasova, which I guess shouldn't surprise anyone. But he does lead it in total charges drawn this year, because Ersan hasn't played every game.
Beautiful. That's what I like to see.
I'm
half right. Yeah, exactly.
What do we make of the DeMar DeRozan MVP case? Obviously, he's not going to win, but do we think he should be in like the top 5?
There's just so many candidates that are above him, and it has nothing to do with taking anything away from DeMar. I think he's had a tremendous season. His 3-point shooting has really kind of fallen off recently, which that stinks a lot.
Down to 32% again.
Right. Last night, I think it was last night against the Nuggets, I saw him attempt to pull up and just airball, and it was like he's not gonna try that again, which that stinks.
Honestly, I just hope he's not like tired more than anything, because I would like to see them at full strength going forward into the playoffs. I would like to see this team really, really push a team like Cleveland. I think that they are the best team in the East, to be honest, and I just hope that he hasn't burned himself out over the course of the year.
No, but I mean, I think it was last night's game. I don't even think he had to close, because Dwayne Casey was wise enough to just ride the bench unit that was just crushing the Nuggets on a second night of a back-to-back. So I don't think he'll wear out. I think he's really dealt fantastically with double teams and making the right pass, making singles and doubles instead of trying to make home run plays.
That's a great point.
In years past. So I'm a huge fan of DeMar. I wrote a pretty long piece about him earlier this season, and he's clearly made strides on both ends this year in a lot of different ways. I would have to really think hard if I'm going to have him top 5 on my ballot. There's just so many, just great individual seasons this year throughout the league.
So the last thing that I'm going to kind of bring up here about Toronto will be kind of matchup based, right? So they're looking at one of probably Milwaukee or Miami in the first round. I would think that Washington ends up just slightly ahead of both of those two. Does Milwaukee really scare you if you're Toronto right now?
I don't. It's a tough question to answer. I don't think so. Obviously, they would have the best player in that series, and Giannis he's a monster on both ends, and I think that Joe Prunty would seriously consider playing him 48 minutes in every game. I'm not even kidding. I don't know how you could take him out and give him any rest,
especially against those bench units from Toronto. Like, they will just murder the Bucks bench units. Right.
And so when I look at the Bucks, I mean, unless Malcolm Brogdon's back, who, his loss has been huge. I think Jabari Parker, I don't want to call it a disappointment because maybe my personal expectations were a little too high, but yeah. I think just mentally the way he's kind of weaved his way through his comeback hasn't been great. I mean, he's really chucking the ball, and that's not going to fly. He was benched down the stretch of last night's game against the Clippers for good reason. He's a terrible defender. So when I look at this team, I mean, they really don't shoot threes. They can't make threes. The Spurs, Greg Popovich enacted a 2-3 zone earlier this week, or it might have been Sunday, and just dared guys to shoot threes. And when you're the Bucks and your response to that is playing Jason Terry and Brandon Jennings in your backcourt, that's not going to cut it in the playoffs. I'm sorry. So I think Giannis, but my thing with Giannis also, he is so incredible and one of my favorite players to watch. But the 3-point shooting is problematic in a 7-game series, and it kind of separates him from other offensive superstars who probably have a little bit more success, or at least an easier path towards success when you're going through the regular season and you're able to attack in the open floor more, and it's much more of an open game, a transition-based game, which is how Milwaukee gets a ton of their points. So I don't know. And I say all that, and it's just like, if Giannis goes supernova and he does in fact play 48 minutes a game, that could be a series. I mean, if they get anything out of Bledsoe, Bledsoe's hitting shots and playing huge minutes, if Middleton is hitting shots, playing huge minutes,
that's what scares me. Is like, if I'm Toronto and I'm looking at a lineup of Eric Bledsoe, one of Malcolm Brogdon or Tony Snell, Chris Middleton, probably Giannis, and then they're probably going to play John Henson, but I would avoid that, and I would probably just play the other of Malcolm Brogdon or Tony Snell and play Giannis at the 5, which they've experimented a little bit with down the stretch. Or you could play Jabari Parker, obviously, with Giannis at the 4-5 combo. That lineup scares me a little bit, just because if I'm Toronto, I tend to play a little bit smaller, right? Like, Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry are both 6 foot, 6'1", and they're going to have trouble contesting against some of the bigger guards that Milwaukee can throw at you. Their length can really kind of cut down issues in the half court, even though their defense as a whole this year has been relatively disappointing. They can present matchup problems for Toronto if they choose to, but they need to choose to in a lot of ways too.
I think it's really difficult to present a matchup problem with Toronto. I mean, they could put Ibaka at the 5, Siakam at the 4. They could play CJ Miles at the 4. I think Poeltl is athletic enough. Poeltl has really shocked me. I don't watch college basketball, and everyone was saying he was kind of more of a low post, methodical scorer. I mean, that dude he's so energetic, and he's so athletic and really intelligent, and he can really pass. And
Utah used him that way in college, but the appeal behind him as a prospect was that he's athletic and could actually move. with touch and with rebounding ability at his size, right? Like the fact that he's white threw some people off, I think.
No, but yeah, and then we haven't even mentioned Jonas Valanciunas' name, and he's having the best year of his career.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm not going to close with JV, particularly if you play Giannis at the 5, but I think Siakam, Ibaka front court is really long, really athletic. Siakam, I think he makes up for his poor shooting with just he'll fake a DHO and one dribble from, elbow extended and he's at the rim dunking on you. He's a really special player in that way. And then Ibaka, who at least will space the floor. He'll give you some pick and pop action. I think that it's really difficult to kind of put them in an uncomfortable place. They've got so many weapons and have been playing in these Dwayne Casey has done a really good job deploying all these different lineups all year long. You're not going to catch them off guard.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good point. They can just match up with you in any way that you want to match up, basically. Even if they don't want to close with Fred VanVleet and they still want to close with another guard between DeMar and Kyle, they can just throw DeLon Wright out there. And DeLon Wright's 6'5" with like a 6'8" wingspan. And that's a problem for other teams. So there's just no way that you can, like you said, make them uncomfortable with the ball in their hands.
Yeah, I was about to bring up DeLon Wright's name, and I was about to call him Darrell Wright because I always get them mixed up. But he's been fantastic. I think VanVleet has kind of stolen his thunder a little bit.
Yeah.
Just the season and the story of VanVleet has kind of overshadowed Wright's season. But Wright has been, he's a 40% 3-point shooter. He kind of just meanders his way to the rim over smaller guards regularly. Yeah. So they're really good.
And we haven't even mentioned Norman Powell, who they just gave a crazy amount of money to. I wonder if they would do that contract. Yeah. I wonder if they'd do that contract again.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I don't think when they did that, they weren't sure what they had with Anunoby, and Anunoby basically took that spot and owned it.
DeLon too. They didn't 100% know that DeLon was going to be this.
Right, exactly. So, for a guy who was basically out of the rotation entirely in the middle of the season for stretches, I think Norm Powell is really good.
Yeah, and
can help this team. So I'm glad. I think they're glad that they have him, and they're not really going over the tax. This year they did not have to go over the tax. I don't think they're over the tax to have that contract. So yeah, I don't know. To be honest, it's a slight overpay, but in this situation, but it's one that I think they'll happily swallow.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right there. Let's kind of just move on through here. We've got Boston. This is probably going to make you sad, isn't it?
4-game winning streak, Sam.
Positive. I like that. They are in a 4-game winning streak. It's really important. I saw that earlier today in your Outlet Pass article that everyone should go read over on Vice.com. You wrote about Marcus Morris, MVP candidate. And I just wanted to give you the floor to discuss Marcus Morris's upcoming, at least, March MVP candidacy. This is March. Shout out John Rothstein.
Well, first of all, he unfortunately sprained his ankle in their last game, which is devastating, and he's not going to play tonight against the Utah Jazz. So that's just, that's right up there with Gordon Hayward's injury, in my opinion, and impacting the team's winning percentage. Marcus Morris, all year long, he was really just, he looked he should have looked very uncomfortable, but he wasn't looking he just was out of place.
The thing with Marcus Morris is that he will do what Marcus Morris does, anywhere he is, no matter what. Like he's going to be happy to do those mid-post turnarounds and to just kind of be the player that Marcus Morris has always been, regardless of playing in Boston, who doesn't want to do any of what Marcus Morris does, or if he's playing in, Phoenix, who allows Marcus Morris to do everything that he wants to do.
Yeah, I mean, he has the third highest usage on the team this season, which is if you were to tell me that Marcus Morris had the third highest usage on the Celtics in March, back before the season started, I would have told you that they won 25 games. It's kind of remarkable. But in this month, I mean, he's hitting like half of his catch and shoot threes. He's if you just look at shots that he takes that are contested, the volume is just like up there with some of the best players in the league, and like Jamal Crawford and Michael Beasley and guys who just are total irrational confidence. So that's basically what he is, but he's making the shots during a stretch when that's exactly what the Celtics need, because they have besides Terry Rozier, who's that's his own phenomenon.
We're going to talk about Terry.
I knew we would. Thank you. That's why I love you, Sam. There's really very few offensive options, very few guys who can create their own shot. So they basically just needed Marcus Morris to be Marcus Morris, when earlier in the year that's not what they needed him to fit in and be more of a spot shooter. And so right now he's kind of just he's perfect, and we'll see how long it takes for him to be out. How long he's out with the sprained ankle? Hopefully not too long, because their offense is it's not great without him.
Yeah, no, it's really not. I appreciate the fact that he has value right now whenever Kyrie is down, whenever Daniel Tice is down, because like Tice actually was kind of taking some of his minutes earlier in the year. Obviously, without Gordon Hayward, without Marcus Smart, who can guard down the lineup, he's someone that you would think would eventually be able to allow Boston to sit Marcus Morris theoretically because of his ability to guard fours. I just like the fact that he's been useful. I like the fact that he's been shooting 39% from three now this year, particularly very strong, as you mentioned, over the course of the last what I would say the last 3 weeks, maybe.
Yeah. Just it's been a splendid March for Marcus Morris.
Yeah, and he goes on these hot streaks from time to time, and they're why he will play in the NBA for the next probably 6 years, despite being Marcus Morris, and that's fine. You mentioned contested shooting, and I wanted to bring up good center Greg Monroe. Greg Monroe is taking 2.1 field goal attempts per game with the defender within 2 feet of him. That seems like too many for Greg, even though he's shooting 55% on them. That just doesn't seem like the way Boston wants their offense to run whenever he's taking 30% of his shots in a heavily contested manner. He's like the only person taking 30% of his shots that contested who takes as many shots as he does.
Yeah, I just said that Marcus Morris was third on the team in usage, and Mr. Monroe is number 2, which, I mean, he's only played 18 games or whatever, but that's obviously not great. The Celtics have it's tough because you can't really play Monroe as the 5-man. So the injuries that they've had, to Tice, and I mean, they have to basically play Al Horford beside Monroe and go unnaturally large, which is not something that Brad Stevens wants to do at all. So his fit has been, he's had moments on the Celtics, particularly offensively, attacking opposing bench units, but at the end of the day, I just don't know what his minutes are going to look like in the playoffs. I think you're going to have a lot of Al Horford at the 5, surrounded by shooting. And you hope that you can get out of this first round matchup, most likely against the Miami Heat, and get Kyrie and Marcus Smart back. But I just don't know what Monroe can give you in a 7-game series. It's tough. It's and everything you just said about all the attempts that he has that are contested. It's when he backs someone down and he turns right shoulder and he's like basically in the restricted area, but he's not drawing a foul, and it's just like and the ball just falls off the rim, and it's like that was a great possession, Celtics.
Well, it's that, and then you look at the on-off numbers too. Like they're 8 points worse defensively when he's on the floor, and they're still 3 points worse offensively when he's on the floor. Plus, you just look at his numbers just on the face of them by himself. He's been solid. He has like a 57% true shooting percentage. 16% assist rate. He grabs defensive rebounds, gobbles offensive rebounds, but it's just not effective. It's just not in any way effective basketball, and that's kind of the story of Greg Monroe's career at this stage, isn't it?
Yeah, sadly. I will say he's turns it over quite a bit. I do think his passing, particularly high-low, has been pretty impressive. They'll get from the ball at the elbows, and he'll be able to hit cutters. He's really smart like that. But his usage is just really high, and he's not efficient enough to kind of justify a usage rate being that high.
Yeah, and one place that I thought he would be useful would be just like backing up Al Horford and being a guy that they could use in like dribble handoff settings, because Al's so good in either dribble handoffs or fake handoffs where he drives. That's a skill that Monroe should theoretically have, given his passing ability, given his mobility with the ball in his hands, and his actual just ability to handle the ball and not fumble it, basically. They're only utilizing him in like 0.6% of his possessions are in handoff settings. He has one possession in a handoff setting this year. That's surprising to me, and it's a little bit, it kind of shows where I think he's at this stage.
Yeah, the thing about the Celtics and how they kind of want to play, they've had to deviate a little bit this year, but they don't, or I should say Brad Stevens does not like rim rolling bigs. So
yeah,
if you're going to have Monroe in that situation, it's more than likely than not that he'll pop, and it's really does no good to have him pop for a long two. So that's just not the type of offense that Stevens wants to play. So really what they do is just they utilize him in post-ups, hope he can draw help. But NBA teams, they watch basketball. They have advanced scouts, so they don't send the help. And
they know that he's at 0.79 points per possession on post-ups.
Exactly.
And there's just no point in sending help. Let's talk about the god, Terry Rozier. I'm just going to give you the floor and allow you to preach at the altar of Terry.
Yeah, I've been, me, I've been a huge Terry. I've been driving the Terry Rozier bandwagon for a few years now. He had his breakout in last year's postseason, and I think he's had like a second breakout this year, particularly over the past, I'd say, 15 or so games.
For sure.
He's just looking at the 3-point shooting numbers. He's shooting 44% on 6.5 threes per game over their last 20 games. Which is that's really good, and a lot of those are like they're not. I won't say that they're Steph Curry pull-ups, but they're super duper shots that not a lot of players have a green light with, where he will pull up in transition from a foot behind the 3-point line. Sometimes it's not a great look, but he confidently knocks them down. And
it's
there's
never a shot Boston seems like they want in the scheme of their offense, and it works more often than you would think.
Yeah, and if you just go back to Al Horford's first training camp, he raved about Terry Rozier multiple times to the media back when I was covering the team, and he was just wowed by the things that he was doing athletically in practice and in scrimmages. And I think we saw it on the glass quite a bit just the way he would sky for offensive rebounds, and he's one of the better rebounding guards in the league. And he's rangy and he's quick defensively like a cat, but like the way he kind of is able to get to the basket now in the half court, the way he is able to elevate on those pull-ups that I just mentioned that are above the break and knock them down consistently, it just changes the entire the ceiling of this team, really, and it really has them wondering, who should stay in the long term as someone who can complement Kyrie Irving long term, and can these two? They've had a ton of success this year when those two have been on the floor, but I would really like to see what they can do in a postseason setting, in extended minutes, sharing the court.
So, kind of arbitrary endpoints here, but it actually is basically right when Rozier started to get significant minutes. He started against New York on January 31st, had 17 points, 11 rebounds, 10 assists, the Terry triple-double game. Since that point, he's averaging 16.3 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists on 44% three-point. Let's even throw that number down to 39%, because that's probably more in line with what he is as a shooter. Right now, over the course of the entire season, there are 5 players in the NBA averaging at least 16 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists on 39% three-point shooting. Kyle Lowry, Kevin Durant, Nikola Jokic, Stephen Curry, and then the aberrant Tyreek Evans year. Terry is right there in terms of just how ridiculous he has been over that stretch. He's not on the top 4 of those guys' level, but he's very clearly established himself as a top 30 point guard in the NBA.
Yeah, he's been very vocal about wanting to be someone's starting point guard. That will never happen in Boston so long as Kyrie Irving is there and he re-signs his max deal and he's healthy. But I'm also of the belief that, in today's NBA, it's perfectly fine to have 2 guys who you would nominally label as a point guard sharing the court a majority of the time, and particularly closing games, which is really, when things matter. I think starting it's pretty antiquated belief system by everyone except the guys who start and who come off the bench. It's no denigration to him if he does. But I think he has, he's earned a spot long-term potentially in closing lineups, which is, really interesting for this team, and the way that they're able to take advantage of the three-point line. And, he can guard both backcourt positions. He's really smart defensively. So, yeah, he's made strides this year that even the driver of the bandwagon, was not necessarily expecting.
Well, in the case of Terry, Boston is always going to need a really, really good backup point guard. And the reason for that is because of Kyrie Irving's injury history. So if you're in a situation where you have Terry Rozier as your backup point guard and you have to end up paying him $12 million a year to stay, I think you have to do that. The problem will be next offseason if a team decides, all right, we think Terry can be our starting point guard, and they give him Dennis Schroeder money.
Well, yeah, and then also what happens with Marcus Smart, who's the other love of my life. And I'm not sure, I'm fairly certain that, given the way this year has gone, that Marcus probably should have taken the extension that was offered to him by the Celtics before the season started. I don't think he's going to get big money, let alone long-term money. But yeah, I don't think that the Celtics can afford to lose Rozier. I know he's one of Danny's favorite players. And so, losing him in free agency would be a huge blow to this team. They've developed him from the start into what he is, and he is great. He's just been a great player for the Celtics. So
now that we've talked really positively about the Celtics, we probably need to actually be realistic about them. Because Kyrie is out, and obviously they're not awesome offensively when Kyrie is off the floor. Let's start here. So when Kyrie is on the floor, both Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown whenever they're on the floor with Kyrie. They have a 109 offensive rating. When Kyrie is off the floor and Jason Tatum's on the floor, it's 105. When Kyrie Irving's off the floor and Jaylen Brown is on the floor, it's 103. Overall on the season, when Kyrie Irving's on the floor, Boston has a 109 offensive rating. When he's off the court, they have a 104 offensive rating. They have a 111.7 offensive rating with him on the floor and a 104 offensive rating with him off the floor. This team just probably can't get enough offense without Kyrie to be a consistent threat in the East, right?
Probably. I mean, particularly in a playoff series, where Kyrie's value really shines in crunch time. It has all year. We know what he's done in big spots in the playoffs against some of the best defenses that the league has ever seen. And the way he's able to attack switching and the way he's able to isolate and just create ridiculous shots, step back threes, that sort of thing. I don't know how good you can be with the way that Boston wants to play. As good as Marcus Morris has been, I don't know if that's going to be, your high usage response to Kyrie's injury. So, I mean, my mentality and my expectations have basically been that, pending the matchup, I don't necessarily think that, the Celtics, as good as they play defensively and as sound as they are and as much as they embrace the offensive system and as good as they've shot the ball as a team, I just don't know if they will have enough horses to get out of the first round without Marcus and Kyrie. That's just a lot to put on Terry Rozier's shoulders, but then also, the other effect there is that, Shane Larkin, who I do think is a solid fourth guard, he's going to have to get into the rotation. So tricky for the Celtics if Kyrie can't go.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, I mean, it's a 3 to 6 week injury that occurred, I believe 2 weeks ago now, right?
Well, they had the surgery, I think it was last Friday, so, right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, so he's going to probably almost definitely miss or come back. Maybe he'll come back in the middle of a first round series if it's a long one and a competitive one. But again, it's like, I don't know if that necessarily is the Celtics. What they don't really care about winning the first round this year.
Yeah.
So making sure he's healthy. They're still trying to play the long game here. They're not going to have Gordon Hayward. So I could totally see the Celtics losing in 5 or 6 to the Miami Heat. That just would not shock me at all.
Let's talk about that real quick. What team do you think Boston should rather play between Milwaukee and Miami?
I know they would rather play Miami. And it's basically comes down to, star power. We talked about it earlier with Giannis and having to go up against him in a playoff series where, I mean, you'd basically have to match up. Like when Al Horford isn't on the court, Al Horford can't go the full 48, and he can't even go, he could
probably can't go 40.
I don't know if they would want to push it. I mean, that's the whole thing here. Like, if you're the Celtics, what is our risk factor to get out of this round, only to potentially face off against LeBron James in the second round? Like, it's not. I don't know how aggressive they want to be in that situation. And Giannis, there's really no one else on the team who can come close to stopping him.
Yeah. Other than Marcus Morris.
Exactly, of course, but we don't know how he's going to look with that after that sprained ankle. So
LeBron stopper Marcus Morris.
Exactly. So I don't know. I think everything that I said earlier about the Milwaukee Bucks, their lack of 3-point shooting, the way they bog down in the half court. I think the Celtics are also built offensively. Their system is built, although they haven't really moved the ball this year as well as in years past. But when you have Al Horford as kind of your pivot guy, and the way he's so smart and is able to move the ball, they could really take advantage of just how aggressive the Bucks are defensively. So I don't know how difficult it would be necessarily to put up points against Milwaukee. But relative to the Miami Heat, I know from just talking to some people on that team that the star power is what really scares you in a playoff series, particularly when Giannis would play all those minutes. So
a lot would depend on Hassan Whiteside being available too for Miami. That's a different team with Whiteside, I think, in terms of the way that they can punish Boston and really put to the test how improved Boston is on the defensive glass in a 7-game series.
Yeah, Whiteside is tricky. I actually kind of would like I like how Horford would be able to space the floor in that matchup. And I don't know how many minutes he would be able to play, but I think just how Eric Spoelstra is able to, he could go with a 4-guard lineup with Josh Richardson basically playing the 4, and you play Tyler Johnson, Dragic, Wayne Ellington, and you just that's just a really difficult lineup to match up against, and just they have so much depth at key positions in the wing. James Johnson, who's playing extraordinary on the defensive end lately. He didn't shut out LeBron last night, but he did a hell of a job on him. So Miami has different lineup combinations. Definitely, if you have Whiteside in there, that makes it a lot trickier to obviously finish around the basket and everything. And Boston has had their rebounding issues.
They also have sleeper agent Kelly Olynyk too. Yeah,
who's I think he's having just a really underrated season. I agree
with that.
He's definitely, he does a lot of things for those bench units, especially when he's at the 5. So yeah, I think Miami, and then you throw in the fact that they have Eric Spoelstra, who's one of the 5 best coaches in the game, and it's just a really tricky team to take down in a playoff series that would be competitive.
Yeah, I kind of think that I would be a little bit more worried about Miami than Milwaukee, because Milwaukee's just so unstable right now in a lot of ways. I haven't been a huge fan of what I've seen from Joe Prunty yet. He has dialed back the defensive pressure a little bit, which is good, but not quite enough, I don't think. But then again, I'm talking about a Miami team where Dwayne Wade is taking 20 shots per 36 minutes. So what are we talking about?
Yeah, Wade is a super interesting X factor in that he will submarine your basketball team. I think. I mean, one would assume that that's where we're headed if his usage continues to be astronomical.
Dwayne Wade right now for Miami.
Yeah.
31 usage rate per 36-minute numbers of 20.9 points, 4.7 assists, 5.7 rebounds on 43% from the field and 49 true shooting percentage.
Yeah, that's not going to cut it.
Oh, my God. Oh, Dwayne. The last team we need to talk about here in depth is Philadelphia, and we're not going to go too crazy here because we talked about Philadelphia a little bit on the most recent podcast. But Philadelphia, I think, can present some interesting matchup problems. I would particularly point out Toronto for some of the reasons that I mentioned with Milwaukee, to where, Philadelphia can just play these massive lineups that I think Toronto might have some issues with. But at the same token, this is still an extremely young team. And even if Joel Embiid might be the best player in I would say most playoff series possible, right? He's better than Victor Oladipo. I don't know, is he better than DeMar DeRozan? In a 7-game playoff series, would you rather have Joel?
I'm not going there yet.
Yeah.
But ask me in 2 months.
I'd probably rather have him than anyone on Boston right now. If you're telling me, we don't know what's going on 100% with John Wall, I would take him over everyone on the Wizards. So, they're in a really interesting place right now to where they can be dangerous, but I don't know that we have enough information yet on them either.
I mean, they're the team that everyone's saying is super petrified of. Nobody wants to touch them. And I understand that. I think that their starting five is probably the best. It might be the best, non-Rockets or Warriors division, the best five-man unit in the league, which is just like, where did that come from? I mean, I thought that they would have the potential, if they played Saric in their starting lineup, they would have enough passing, enough shooting, enough length to really just beat up teams on the glass and space the floor. And I didn't expect Ben Simmons to be this good, but I expected him to be pretty excellent. So I think that they're the different lineup combinations that they have, the way that they can now sub Redick out, 6 minutes into the first quarter and put in Marco Bellinelli and then bring back Redick later on with Embiid. It's just like devastating. Like, that's just the way the options that Brett Brown has are just all over the place, all sorts of wonderful. I'm not sure. I wrote earlier about Markelle Fultz, and did you watch his debut? His second debut, I should say.
I did. We talked about it pretty extensively on this show.
Okay,
what did you think?
I don't want to rehash, but I mean, all things considered, I thought he looked good.
I think it's definitely more positive than negative.
Yes. One thing that was very notable to me was the fact that he didn't play a second with Ben Simmons. And so I don't know how impactful he can be in a playoff series if if he's going 10 minutes, because Simmons minutes are going to be up there.
He's going to play 40 minutes. The thing with Fultz is that I think it's going to be very easy to take advantage of him in a 7-game series. His shot right now is just too long. It takes too long to get off. Teams are going to be able to close out on it. It's just not enough of a threat to where I think they're going to be worried about it. And it's really easy to game plan around those guys. Now, I think he's going to be able to shoot long term, and I think he looks awesome in a lot of other aspects of his game, especially on defense, where you could really see how his size affected a lot of different things out there. Even against a guy like Jamal Murray, he kind of dwarfed Jamal Murray despite being like only an inch taller, just in terms of his shoulders being broader, him being a lot longer, just bulkier in general. But yeah, I just don't think he's going to be like a major impact player in the playoffs either.
No, and you can't really, as good as three-point shooter in terms of percentage as TJ McConnell has been this year, I don't know if you can play Fultz and McConnell together either. So there's some questions in the backcourt, and Robert Covington is a streaky shooter, but obviously gives you a lot in terms of his length in the defensive end, and teams do respect his three-point shot, so he does space the floor.
What lineup can you throw out there, I guess? Like, is it Fultz, Bellinelli, like Saric,
Ilyasova,
and then like
or
Amir?
Embiid. You would no, I don't think he can play with Amir. I mean, you can't. He just needs space.
It's
clearly.
Really hard.
And you don't. I mean, in a playoff series, you're not going to go out of your way to appease the 19-year-old rookie and make sure he's comfortable. I mean,
right.
This team has had a ton of success without Fultz, so I don't know if he'll even factor into the playoffs at all. But I'm more interested in just seeing, how many minutes can Joel Embiid go without getting in foul trouble? Are they going to turn the ball over, at a rate that is completely debilitating? How will defenses play Ben Simmons knowing that he will not shoot? These are the questions kind of that I have for them, but I think they're definitely for real. And in a first-round series against a team like, Washington or Indiana, I mean, I don't know anybody who's watched basketball this year who could not pick the Sixers in that series.
Yeah. I mean, the bigger question is how many problems do they give Boston if they can jump the Cavs for the 3 seed? I think I might pick Philly in that series right now, depending on what happens with Kyrie, right?
Oh, if Kyrie isn't 100%, that changes everything. And same with Marcus Smart, because they don't know the way that you play Embiid, like when he's on the floor with shooting, is just so difficult. And the Celtics basically have an answer for Ben Simmons, as good as he is. They've had a lot of success this year when they threw Al Horford on him. But when those two are on the floor together and the ball goes to Embiid in the post, and then do you double him and hope he turns it over, which is a pretty good proposition, or just like how do you play it? So I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, I kind of agree with you that I would probably lean towards Philly, who have had a higher net rating than Boston for lengthy stretches this season and have been one of the best teams in basketball since the All-Star break. But Kyrie is Kyrie, and I don't really necessarily think that when you play Rozier and Kyrie together that they have necessarily two really quality perimeter defenders who can slow those guys down either. So it would be a really interesting series that would probably go the distance. So
the kind of other matchup here is obviously against Cleveland. They beat Cleveland in Cleveland earlier in the month. They theoretically have a lot of different guys that they could throw at LeBron. Like, you could throw Covington at him, you could throw Simmons at him if you wanted to. I guess you could throw Dario at him just from a size perspective if you were out of options. But I would hope that you don't do that. But I kind of understand the idea why people would think that Philadelphia could cause Cleveland problems,
I mean, they've manhandled them in just about every matchup earlier this year. I mean, Embiid.
No, I mean, I think aren't they 1-2 against them?
I'm literally talking about just the last time they played, and then I have a little bit of recency bias going, but at least since the trade.
Yeah.
But just they don't have anybody who can guard and come close to guarding Embiid one-on-one on the block, which you kind of desperately need. And when the Celtics would play against, or if they do play against them, it's then you have to play Aaron Baines extended minutes, and that just kind of the Celtics have had success with those lineups because Kyrie kind of doesn't need space to cook. He's that special, but if Kyrie isn't 100% and he's not hitting shots and he's not able to penetrate, then it's just Aaron Baines is kind of a sore spot for your offense. So,
do you have to guard Embiid with LeBron at a certain stage?
That's a really interesting proposition that I never even really considered. I mean, I would think that Tristan Thompson would be your best bet almost exclusively, or Kevin Love's not an atrocious post defender.
That's true.
So that might be your thing, and then you pray that the Sixers get in their own heads and they just try to put Love in pick and pops with Embiid and hope that they can attack that way. But I don't know. I mean, the way that they just controlled the pace of that game, they smothered them defensively. The Sixers can just switch everything in their front court, stay big, and it's just a really special roster right now.
So, given kind of the matchups, I think we've talked about just every potential matchup among the top teams except for maybe Philadelphia, Toronto. What do you think ends up happening in the East? Let's just finish on that. How do we think this ends up going down?
I think that LeBron James will have a 45-point triple-double in Game 7 in Toronto, and the Cavs will go to the finals. That's my prediction of how it'll go down.
Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that. I'm very concerned about LeBron and the Cavs at this stage. I've been pretty skeptical of this group throughout the entirety of the season. I was certainly very skeptical of the previous roster, which we can talk about that as being a previous roster, not even the same roster that this team had 3 months ago. It's so hard to know what to think of the Cavs because we just haven't seen them. We haven't seen them play together. We have no idea.
No, but we know LeBron.
We know LeBron, but like...
We know that he can get to the rim against any individual on the planet, really. And he can draw help. And we know that J.R. Smith and Kyle Korver and, even Rodney Hood, even Jordan Clarkson, these are all capable spot three-point shooters that you have to respect. So, yeah.
What is the team that most worries you in... I mean, they're basically open to potentially, Washington, Milwaukee, and Miami? Like, what team worries you most if you're Cleveland in the first round?
None of those teams. I mean, I guess I would go Milwaukee if I had to choose. Washington with a healthy John Wall. He just doesn't have enough time to acclimate with that team, which would be my primary concern. I just don't think it's necessarily their year. It would just be really awkward, even though, Satoransky has been one of the more improved players in basketball, and I've really enjoyed watching him play in Wall's absence. I don't know if it'll just be a seamless, okay, Satoransky, you're now coming off the bench with Kelly Oubre, and Wall's going to start, and he's going to look like John Wall, and Satoransky, you're going to look like you have the past few months coming off the bench against opposing second units. Like, I just don't know if that's a pipe dream or not. So
the problem with that is, I think that I'm not worried about Satoransky. I think that he has the basketball IQ to where he'll be fine, like in whatever role he's in at this stage. The thing that just worries me is you have to get everything out of John Wall in that series. Like, he has to be the best player in that series, probably even better than LeBron. And I don't know that is possible given where he's at.
That's not possible now.
Given where he's at right now. Like, I think that you can convince yourself that over a 7-game stretch, like, maybe John Wall can average 25 and 10. I don't think he can do that this year.
No, probably not. So, yeah, I would go with Milwaukee as the toughest opponent out of those teams. But again, I just don't think Cleveland's really sweating anybody in the first round, to be honest.
And then the second round, they're literally open to everyone at this stage because they're in such a precarious position at the 3 and 4. What do we think of them going up against any of the top 3? What team should scare them the most out of the top 3?
I mean, they should badly want the 3 seed. I think that's something that they should be fighting for right now.
I agree.
To play Boston in round 2. I mean, that's just a completely different... You've owned Toronto in your career if you're LeBron, but this isn't the same situation. Like, he's more or less going at this team, this like juggernaut regular season team, by himself. So I would want to put that off as long as possible if I was him, and let Toronto fight it out with Philly or whoever in round 2. So if I was Cleveland, I would definitely prefer Boston in round 2. I don't think there's really any argument against that.
Yeah, this is my podcast, so I'm not going to make a prediction and look like an idiot later. Until I have to, at least. We'll go with that. Pina, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people what's going on in your life. What's up, man? Just give the people what they need.
Okay, well, everyone, Sam's wonderful listeners, if you would like to follow me on Twitter at Michael V. Pina, that would be fantastic. And I got a few features coming out, hopefully before the playoffs start. And then, just rating through the playoffs and really enjoying to see how all the wonderful Eastern Conference matchups play out.
You guys should all go read Mike's work. I think he wrote what was my favorite thing of the year so far in the NBA. I think that your LaMarcus Aldridge thing was probably my favorite thing I've read so far.
Oh, wow. Thanks, man.
It's not like I'm not going to sit here and say like it was some incredible piece of writing. Like, I don't know what the fuck that even means, to be honest. But like, it was just such an interesting look into a very complex human being and into a player that has so often not been open. And you got him to open up in a pretty significant manner. And I think that's a very strong testament to you. Well,
thank you. It's all the thanks to LaMarcus for being willing to talk. I mean, that's basically, as you know, as a writer, that's what it all comes down to sometimes. It's just the subject, how he's feeling when you meet him. Yeah. So wonderful. I guess I would just say that I was lucky. That's how I would sum it up.
Yeah, no, it was just very interesting listening to him kind of go on about Portland and go on about like his entire career. Like it was a career retrospective almost in so many ways on a player that has been, you know, he was supposedly the next great thing in Portland with Greg Oden and Brandon Roy, and then that falls apart and he has to keep that together by a string. And, you know, he ends up with Damian and there apparently is some friction there that people reported for a long time. And then, you know, he goes to San Antonio and now he's dealing with the Kawhi deal. It's just he's had a very bizarre career.
He's had, and I would argue, a great career. And one of the more overlooked careers of his generation. And he hasn't really caught the breaks of, say, a Pau Gasol.
Yeah.
He was not traded in his prime to play with another super duper star. And that, you know, that hurts you. That hurts how you're perceived, unfortunately, in this league. But he's been remarkably consistent throughout his career. You know, we talked earlier about top 5 MVP candidates with DeMar. I had no idea that what spawned the whole idea to write about LaMarcus was no one was talking about LaMarcus as a potential MVP candidate, and so he's had probably his best season. Yeah. And I hope his knee is okay. He bumped his knee last night and he's questionable, I think, for their next game against the Thunder. So fingers crossed for his health because he's a good dude, and he's having a great season.
This has been the Game Theory Podcast. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe over on iTunes. Please remember to go subscribe to us on SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, whatever podcasting app you use. Please go on ahead and hit that subscribe button. We'll be back later this week with another podcast. I'm going to try and talk a little bit more about the Western Conference, the conference in which LaMarcus Aldridge is currently battling for a playoff spot, because it is also kind of a mess right now, given the Warriors' injuries and given just the total clump of teams right now fighting for spots. Really, I would say 4 through 8 now that Portland has kind of separated themselves by a couple of games. So we'll be back later this week, but until next time, we will talk soon. Bye.